Imagine standing at the edge of a cliff, staring across a vast canyon of human history, and realizing something uncomfortable, even frightening. The people we often admire, elect, we follow, and obey are not always the wisest, the most ethical, or even the most competent. Sometimes they're the boldest liars. Sometimes they're the ones most obsessed with their reflection. Sometimes they're the loudest fools in the room. And yet they lead us. They sit in boardrooms, command armies, build empires, and dominate headlines. Why? Why does leadership so often reward traits we're taught to avoid? That's the dark truth this video dares to confront. That in many systems, political, corporate, even spiritual narcissists, liars, and fools don't just survive. They thrive. And if we don't understand this, we're not just at risk of being manipulated, we're already living in the shadow of those who do. Let's start with the philosophical setup. We are told from childhood that good people rise, that truth always wins, that wisdom is leadership. But history laughs at these fairy tales. Look at the emperors, the tyrants, the demagogues, the CEOs who reshaped nations and companies with charisma, deception, and ego. Look at how often image beats substance. How often confidence beats competence. This isn't just anecdotal, it's structural. Leadership, as currently designed in many systems, doesn't filter for integrity. It filters for visibility. It filters for certainty, even when that certainty is delusional. And in that environment, those who possess the most unshakable self-belief, even if it's rooted in lies, often rise faster than those who are humble, reflective, or honest.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Here's the breakdown. Narcissists have one superpower: they believe their own myth. They see themselves as destined, chosen, special. And because they believe it so completely, others start to believe it too. Charisma is contagious. Confidence is convincing. In a world that moves fast and judges on first impressions, the person who speaks with unwavering certainty, who doesn't second guess, who appears to know exactly where they're going, wins, even if that person is disastrously wrong. And then there are liars. Not just any liars, but those skilled in emotional manipulation. They tell people what they want to hear. They mirror the crowd's desires, fears, and projections. They don't lead with truth, they lead with seduction. And in a culture addicted to dopamine, simplicity, and spectacle, the truth is too slow, too complex, too uncertain to compete. So the lie wins. Often, repeatedly, systematically. And then we have the fools, the ones who rise not because of their brilliance, but because they represent a comforting illusion. They're not dangerous. Because they lie, they're dangerous. Because they don't know they're lying. They believe in simple answers to complex problems. They reduce nuance to slogans. They speak to the lizard brain, not the higher mind. And for many people, that's enough. Because in times of crisis, people don't always want wisdom, they want relief. They want someone to say, "I've got this," even if they don't. And in that desire for certainty, we hand the wheel to people who should never be driving. Let me ask you a confronting question. How many leaders in your life do you follow because they're right or because they're loud? Because they're honest or because they're confident? Because they inspire truth or because they reflect your fears? If we're honest, many of us have been seduced by charisma over character. We've mistaken volume for vision. We've voted, promoted, or followed those who made us feel something, even if they offered nothing of substance. This isn't a flaw in us, it's a flaw in the system. A system that prioritizes performance over principle. But here's where it gets deeper. The philosopher Byung Chul Han talks about the society of transparency, a world where everything is visible, shareable, performable. In such a world, the inner life is devalued. Reflection is too slow. Nuance is too difficult. And so, we begin to reward the appearance of leadership, not the essence. The person who can deliver a powerful TED Talk, who can brand themselves into a movement, who can dominate a debate with sound bites, they win. Not necessarily because they're right, but because they know how to play the optics. And if you think this is just politics or business, think again. It happens in spiritual communities, or in activism, or in education. The ones who rise are often the ones who master narrative, not truth. So what do? Do we give up? Do we accept that power belongs to the most arrogant, the most deceptive, the most performative? No, but we must begin by seeing clearly. Because clarity is the first step toward liberation. Alan Watts once said, "The reason we suffer is not because of the facts, but because of our illusions about the facts." The real danger isn't that narcissists and liars exist, it's that we believe they are rare. That we still cling to the idea that the system is fair. That goodness alone will elevate the wise. That truth, left to itself, will rise to the surface. It won't. Truth needs defenders. Wisdom needs context. Integrity needs structure. And unless we change the incentives of leadership, we will continue to be ruled subtly or overtly by those who know how to game the system better than they know how to serve. Now let's turn this inward, because the most important question isn't just why do they rise? It's also why do we let them? What part of us is drawn to the narcissist, the liar, the fool? Is it our laziness? Our fear? Our desire for a savior? Our addiction to entertainment? Nietzsche warned us not to stare into the abyss for too long, lest we become it. But maybe the darker truth is that we don't stare into the abyss at all, we vote for it. We idolize it. We retweet it. We mistake it for strength. And in doing so, we participate in our own manipulation. So here's the challenge, not to become cynical, but to become awakened. Not to reject leadership, but to redefine it. Not to shame those who rise, but to outgrow the systems that elevate them. To create cultures that reward honesty, humility, and wisdom, not just showmanship. It starts with how we think, how we speak, how we vote, how we model leadership in our own circles. Because the antidote to the narcissist is not the cynic, it's the conscious leader. And the more we become that, the less room there is for anything else. The seduction of certainty, why we choose the confident over the competent. There's something deeply human, almost primitive about our craving for certainty. When faced with chaos, ambiguity, or complexity, our minds instinctively reach for the person who seems most sure. Not the one with the best data, not the one with the most experience or the deepest wisdom, but the one who sounds sure. The one who speaks in absolutes. The one who never hesitates. The one who says, "Trust me, I know." And that's where the danger begins. Because in a world as unpredictable and nuanced as this one, certainty is often a red flag, not a virtue. The most confident person in the room is not always the wisest, they're often the most delusional. But we follow them anyway. Why? The answer lies in psychology, but also in philosophy. Our brains evolved to avoid threat, not to pursue truth. In moments of fear, we don't want nuance, we want direction. We want a map, even if it's wrong. And so we outsource our thinking to those who seem to know the way. We mistake conviction for clarity. But Alan Watts would challenge us here. He would say that true wisdom is comfortable with uncertainty. That the person who admits I don't know is closer to the truth than the one who claims to have all the answers. Because life is not a machine, it's a mystery. And the ones who claim to have solved it are often the ones most disconnected from its depth. But let's go deeper. Why does confidence seduce us so easily? Because confidence is performative. It's a show, and we're wired to respond to performance. Look at the way people rise in politics, in business, in media. It's rarely because they're the most qualified. It's because they can command attention. They can project certainty. They can reduce complexity into digestible, tweetable bites. They understand that in a fast-paced world, most people don't want to think, they want to feel safe. And confidence provides that illusion. But an illusion it is. Because the most dangerous leader is not the one who knows they're lying, it's the one who believes their own fantasy. Let me ask you something that might make you deeply uncomfortable. When was the last time you followed someone not because you understood their reasoning, but because their certainty made you feel secure? Maybe it was a boss, a politician, a spiritual teacher, a charismatic influencer. And how many times did that certainty turn out to be empty? How many times did you ignore your gut in favor of their confidence? And here's where it gets even trickier. The more we reward confidence, the more our systems select for it. That means over time, the people who rise to the top are not necessarily the most capable, but the most performative. Leadership becomes theater. Governance becomes branding. Truth becomes irrelevant. Watts would say this is the spiritual illness of modernity, that we've confused appearance with reality, that we've built civilizations on the illusion of control rather than the embrace of mystery. And in that confusion, we've created leaders who are mirrors of our own unresolved fear. They reflect back to us the certainty we crave, not the truth we need. And the cycle continues. Because fear sells, certainty sells. The truth? It asks something of us. It asks us to grow up, to think, and to wrestle with paradox. And most people, if we're honest, aren't ready for that. So we choose the illusion. We choose the confident over the competent, the loud over the wise, the easy answer over the hard truth. But here's the paradox. Real leaders don't need to be certain. They need to be clear. There's a difference. Clarity is grounded in reality. It admits what it doesn't know. It adapts. It listens. Certainty, on the other hand, is brittle. It cannot be questioned. It cannot evolve. And that's why confident fools often lead us into disaster, because they can't pivot. They can't reflect. They're too busy defending an image. They're addicted to the performance. And in the process, they lose the ability to actually lead. So what do we do with this? How do we break the spell of false certainty? First, we must become better followers. That might sound strange, but it's true. The quality of leadership in any system is a mirror of the quality of followership. If we demand simplicity, we'll get simple-minded leaders. If we reward performance over substance, we'll get performers. But if we start valuing humility, nuance, and clarity, if we refuse to be seduced by certainty, then the system has to change. It has no choice. Because leaders rise to meet the expectations of the crowd. And we are the crowd. Ask yourself this: what kind of leader would I follow if I wasn't afraid? If I didn't need to be coddled or entertained or reassured, if I wanted truth over comfort, what kind of person would I choose to guide me? That's the beginning of wisdom. Because the moment we stop outsourcing our peace to someone else's performance is the moment we reclaim our power. We stop looking for saviors, and we start looking for servants. Not in the submissive sense, but in the sacred sense. A leader should serve reality, not their own ego. A leader should serve the people, not their image. A leader should serve the unfolding of truth, not the maintenance of illusion. Watts would remind us that the most profound truths are not shouted, they're whispered. They're not found in slogans, they're discovered in silence. So maybe the next time you're tempted to follow the confident voice in the room, pause. Breathe. Ask what's really being said here. What's being avoided? What's being sold? Because in that moment of inquiry, you become immune to manipulation. You become sovereign. And once enough people do that, the spell breaks. So yes, the dark truth is that leadership often rewards narcissists, liars, and fools. But the deeper truth is this: we reward them. And until we change what we value, who we follow, and how we think, they will continue to rise. Not because they're powerful, but because we've forgotten we are. Awakening the discernment class, how to build a culture that honors wisdom over noise. If the first realization is that leadership often rewards narcissists, liars, and fools, the next must be this: we are the ones who allow it. And that's not a condemnation, it's a call to consciousness. Because the systems that elevate the loudest over the wisest don't sustain themselves. We sustain them through our attention, our votes, our silence, our addiction to spectacle. But what happens when we stop playing that game? What happens when we awaken not just as individuals, but as a collective of discerners, people who can see through the noise, who value depth over flash, who reward truth, even when it's inconvenient? That's how cultures change. Not through revolution alone, but through evolution of perception. And that's what this final chapter is about: how to build a world where wisdom leads, not performance. Let's start with the core idea. Discernment is the ability to separate signal from noise. It's not about being skeptical of everything, or cynical, or endlessly critical. It's about seeing clearly. It's about recognizing when someone is speaking from presence versus persona, from substance versus script. And in a world flooded with content, charisma, and curated personas, discernment is the new superpower. Those who have it become immune to manipulation. They become the immune system of culture. And when enough of us awaken into that role, something profound shifts. The system no longer rewards those who sell illusions. It begins to reward those who reveal reality. But to get there, we must first detox from the addiction to noise. The algorithms of our time reward outrage, extremism, and simplicity. They feed us what spikes emotions, not what deepens understanding. And so leaders learn to play to emotion, not wisdom. They learn to provoke, not guide. If we want different leaders, we have to become different audiences. That means choosing long form over clickbait, choosing depth over dopamine, listening for what's not being said, slowing down enough to hear the truth behind the tone. because wisdom rarely screams. It speaks in a quiet, steady frequency, and you have to be still enough to receive it. Ask yourself, when was the last time you really listened to someone not to judge or react, but to understand? When was the last time you rewarded someone's honesty, even when their truth made you uncomfortable? That's the kind of listening that builds discernment. And we need more of it, not just in politics or media, but in every room we enter. Because leadership is not just a position, it's a pattern. It emerges wherever people are looking for direction. And when you become someone who honors truth over ego, you start setting the tone in every space you enter. Here's a radical idea. Leadership isn't rare. It's everywhere. The problem is not that there are too few good leaders. The problem is that we overlook them because they don't fit the mold. They don't shout. They don't self-promote. They don't brand themselves as heroes. But they're in your community, your workplace, your family. They're the quiet ones who speak when it matters. The ones who hold space for complexity. The ones who lead not by charisma, but by consistency. And if we want them to rise, we have to start seeing them, affirming them, following them. Because for every narcissist standing on a stage, there's a wise soul in the shadows waiting to be invited in. Watts would say that the world is a play and everyone is wearing masks. But the wise person knows they are wearing one and can take it off. The fool, however, becomes the mask. And today, most leadership is mask on all the time. Image over essence. Optics over truth. But we can change that not by tearing down masks, but by valuing what's behind them. By creating spaces where people don't have to perform to be heard, where vulnerability is not punished, where uncertainty is not mocked, where truth is not just tolerated, it's treasured. Let me ask you this, what would it mean to lead in your own life without pretending, without the mask of perfection, without the performance of certainty? What would it mean to model a new kind of leadership, one rooted in humility, depth, and discernment? Because that's how the world changes. Not when we wait for someone else to rise, but when we embody the very leadership we wish to see. When we stop asking who's in charge, and start asking, how can I be a source of clarity right here, right now? Discernment is not about knowing all the answers. It's about asking better questions, slower questions. It's about becoming a listener in a world of talkers, a seer in a world of spectacle. And it's about cultivating the inner stillness to resist the seduction of noise. Because once you stop reacting to noise, you stop feeding it. And when enough people stop feeding it, the system starves. And a new one emerges. One that rewards the slow, the thoughtful, the wise. One that doesn't need to scream to be heard. So yes, the dark truth is that leadership often rewards narcissists, liars, and fools. But the deeper truth is that we can change that. Not by fighting them directly, but by withdrawing our energy. By becoming so deeply attuned to truth that we no longer fall for illusions. By becoming the kind of humans who see. Because the future doesn't belong to the loudest voices. It belongs to the clearest ones. And clarity is not volume. It's resonance. It's the frequency of truth. And when enough of us tune into that frequency, the whole culture shifts. The question is, are you willing to become that kind of leader? Not one who dominates, but one who discerns. Not one who performs, but one who embodies. Not one who is followed by millions, but one who influences deeply, even if only a few. Because in the end, the world doesn't need more rulers. It needs more real ones, more human beings willing to walk the slow road of truth. And if you're still watching this, maybe just maybe you're one of them.